Hello my friends and fellow traders, welcome back to another PineConnector video. In today's video we're going to be discussing the various syntax and alert commands that we have to work with when sending our TradingView alerts to PineConnector. If this is the first video in this series you're watching, make sure to go back and watch the previous video, as that is where I show you how to set up PineConnector with MetaTrader. Now, PineConnector is a MetaTrader bridge. It's an expert advisor script that runs in MetaTrader. You send your TradingView alerts to that expert advisor, and then that expert advisor executes orders based on what commands you send it through your TradingView alerts. So in today's video, we're going to discuss the various commands we have to work with. Let's get started. All right, so you can find this syntax guide in your account homepage, which can be found by just clicking on this little icon up here. And for the first part of this video, I'm just going to go through each of these components or commands and explain what they do. So the first thing we need to include in every alert command we send to PineConnector is our license ID, which you can also find on your account homepage. So the way most of your alerts will look is you'll have your ID and then a comma and then the symbol you're looking to trade. So euro dollar, for example, never mind my fantastic handwriting, and then obviously your buy or sell direction, or what you want to do with this symbol. If you want to open a buy trade, you would then write buy, or sell if you want to go short. If you want to close your long or close your short, you would just include that command. But towards the end of this video, we'll go over some practical examples of these commands. For now, let's just go through each of these one by one and explain them. So if we're opening a position, a buy or sell position, we need to obviously specify, or not obviously maybe, but it's a good idea to specify a stop loss and a take profit, obviously depending on how your strategy works. So for me, all of my strategies are designed around having a fixed stop loss and some form of a fixed target. Some of my strategies have multiple targets. Maybe I'll manage my second target with discretion or with a exit reason. But most of my trades are going to be opened with a fixed stop loss and a fixed take profit in most cases. The way this works is, depending on how you've set up your expert advisor settings, you can either specify a price for your stop loss and take profit or a pip amount. So before we continue, let me jump over to MetaTrader and show you what I mean by changing your settings regarding your stop loss and take profit. So here I am on the beautiful interface of MetaTrader. Not as slick as TradingView, but it'll do the job. If I want to change my expert advisor settings, I can just press F7, I believe. Yes, I'll have to blur out my license ID here because this is on my actual live account. Unlike the previous videos, which were under a trial account. There are only two settings here that will affect how your alert commands are interpreted by PineConnector. And that is your target type and your volume type. I think by default, this is set to pips and this is set to specified volume. And if your target type is set to TP and SLs, take profit and stop loss based on pips, then when you use this SL and TP command in your alert syntax, you need to specify this number as a whole number in pips. So regardless of what symbol you're on, it doesn't matter how many decimal places are in your standard pip calculation. If you just specify a whole number, PineConnector will convert this into the relevant pip amount for your position. So 25 here is obviously going to be 25 pips above or below your entry, depending on whether you're going long or short. If, however, I have this set to TP and SL based on price, which is my preferred method of using this expert advisor, then whatever number you specify for your SL or TP is a price level. So 1.2012 would set your stop loss to this price, 1.2012. And then once you've specified your stop loss, you can then use the risk parameter to calculate your position size automatically. Again, depending on what setting you've set up in the PineConnector settings. So let's jump back over to MetaTrader and I'll explain what I mean. Here you can see I've set volume type to percentage of balance. This is a percentage of my account balance. If you have this setting set up this way, Then when you use the risk parameter, you just need to specify a whole number, and this will correspond to a percentage of your account balance. So if I have a stop loss, let's say I've set my SL and TP to pips, and I have a 25 pip stop loss, and then I set my risk parameter in the Pine Connector settings to a percentage of my account balance, and I then specify risk as 2, then Pine Connector will automatically calculate how many lots or mini lots or whatever your broker deals in correspond to 2% risk of your account balance based on your stop loss distance, whether that's in price or pips. In other words, whatever you've set your stop loss to, Pine Connector will calculate the distance from your entry to your stop loss, and then it will use the risk parameter to calculate, in this case, if we set it to 2% risk from your entry to your stop loss. Meaning if your stop loss is hit, the position size that you've entered on this trade will account for a 2% loss on that trade. Hopefully that makes sense. If you're at all experienced with trading, then you know exactly what I mean. So moving on, the next order or syntax, command, parameter, whatever you want to call it, we have to work with in Pine Connector is a price parameter. This is for specifying where to put pending orders. Now keep in mind, some of these alerts and the way we use them may change in the future, as Pine Connector is a work in progress. When I first began using Pine Connector, or when the creator of Pine Connector first reached out to me, Alex, shout out to Alex if he's watching this. He has been answering some of your comments in the comments section, which I'm very appreciative for, as I don't have the time to help everyone with this, and he obviously has a more intricate knowledge of how Pine Connector works since he made the thing. He's been really helpful in getting me started with this, and he seems like a top guy, so you're in good hands if you're using Pine Connector. Don't hesitate to reach out to him if you need any help. When he first made me aware of Pine Connector, pending orders were not a thing, so this was just recently added to the Pine Connector Expert Advisor, and it's something we'll play around with later in the video. But basically, if you wanted to set a buy stop, for example, above price action, say price action is in a range, and you want to buy a breakout of the high, you could use Pine Connector to send a buy stop order just above this high, and you can specify where that order goes using this price parameter. But we'll get to that later when we get to practical examples of these commands in the charts. Next up, we have our market order commands. So we have obviously pending order commands or limit orders and buy stop, sell stop orders. Then we have our market order commands, which is just buy or sell at market. So if you want to open a long position, you would specify a buy command. And notice that these commands don't have an equal sign in them. There's no direction equals. So to open a long trade, we would do something like this. Specify your ID, your symbol, and then comma buy, and then comma stop loss equals, let's say 50 pips, comma risk equals, let's say 1% of our account balance. Hopefully you can read this. Lucky for me, I'm a better trader than I am a calligrapher. But anyway, this would open a long position. If we wanted to then close this long position, we would need to specify our license ID, the symbol we want this command to be executed on, comma, and then close long. And that will close this buy trade. And obviously close short would close a sell or short position. So these are our market orders, pretty easy to understand, pretty intuitive. Next up, we have our pending order commands. I'm just going to rush through these because they should be pretty self-explanatory to you if you're an experienced trader and you've used these order types before. But a buy stop order goes above price action. A buy limit order goes below price action, will be filled if price comes down to it. A sell stop order, it says here, place above current market price, but this should be below current market price. So a sell stop, similar to a buy stop going above price action, will go below price action and will be filled if price exceeds that price that you've specified for this sell stop. And a sell limit order will be filled if price action comes up to the price you specify. And then the final two pending order commands we have here is cancel long and cancel short, which, as the name implies, cancels your buy stop buy limits or your sell stop and sell limits. And I haven't mentioned this, but there are examples down the right hand side here, obviously, that demonstrate the syntax for this. So if you wanted to cancel a short position, you would just input your license ID, the cancel short command, and then the symbol you want to cancel those orders on. Let's move on to our break even and trailing commands. First up, we have BE trigger or break even trigger. This will activate your break even order. It'll move your stop loss to break even after your trade gains this number of pips beyond the opening price into profit. So if you set it to 30 and you have a long position open, then when price moves 30 pips in your favor, let's say you entered here and then price hits a 30 pip mark, your stop loss will be brought up to break even. And then you have a BE offset or break even offset. This is how many pips to put your stop loss above your entry price. So I'm assuming this is set to 0 by default, and that means that your stop loss will be placed to your entry price. The reason that Alex has included this command, I would assume, is because of commission and spread issues. I know for me personally, when I'm using a break-even stop, I like to set my stop loss a few pips above my entry price for a long or below for a short, so that I can at least cover the commission cost on the trade. If you set it just to your entry price, then even though your trade was exited for break even, you may have still paid, depending on your position size and time frame you're trading, etc. You could pay a decent price for exiting a trade at break even if you don't use an offset. So in this example, if price moved 30 pips into profit, the stop loss would be moved 5 pips above or below your entry price, depending on whether you're long or short. And there are 2 notes here that are important to address. The first note is that your break-even trigger should be a value that is minimally a minimal distance from your entry price that your broker will allow. So in other words, if you set your break-even trigger to 1 pip and your trade goes 1 pip into profit, moving your stop loss to break even might not be allowed by your broker because it may be triggered instantaneously. And some brokers, I know Oanda, for example, my broker, will not allow me to put a stop loss in a position where it will be immediately executed. It has to be some distance away from price action, taking into account the spread. Now, break-even offset also needs to be below or less than your break-even trigger. So you can't set BE offset to 30 because obviously if your entry is here and your stop loss is 30 pips and then your break-even trigger is 30 pips and you set your offset to 30 pips, then the Pine Connector script will attempt to move your stop loss up 30 pips, which is where price action currently is since it triggered your break-even trigger. And this obviously will not work for the same reasons that this warning is in here, or this note is in here. So keep that in mind when working with break-even commands. It should be self-explanatory for anyone who uses break-even stop losses in their strategies. But for those of you who haven't used this before, those are just some things to keep in mind. Next up, we have trail trig or trail trigger. This is similar to a break-even stop loss, except that it continues moving your stop loss higher and higher in the case of a long trade. Whereas a break-even stop, let's say we enter here on a trailing stop. Your trail trigger, let's say it's 15 pips. That means that when price moves 15 pips into profit and price action tags that level, your stop loss, let's say this was your stop loss, as soon as your 15 pip trigger is hit, your stop loss will be moved up below current price based on these next 2 parameters, which we'll get to in a moment. But this trail dist is trail distance in pips. So let's say this is 10 in this example. When price moves 15 pips into your favor, your stop loss will be moved 10 pips below price action. And then as price continues to move in your favor, the stop loss will continue to creep up higher and higher, 10 pips below the current price. Obviously, trailing stops never move down. So once price action starts to trend down, your stop loss will stay wherever it got to, and eventually price will come down and stop you out when it hits your trailing stop. Whereas obviously with a break-even trade, if you were to enter here and your stop loss down here, if you had a 15 pip break-even trigger, then as soon as price moved 15 pips into favor, your stop loss would just be moved to break even and it will not trail below price action. That should be obvious to most of you, but you'd be surprised at how many traders don't understand that concept. Anyway, the next two commands, the final two commands we have to work with here when using a trailing stop is trail dist and trail step. So trail dist or distance is the distance of the trailing stop loss from the current price. Your stop loss will be placed at trail distance, so this many pips from the current closing price. And then finally we have trail step, which moves the trailing stop loss once price moves by a specified number of pips in your favor. So I'm not super experienced with using trailing stop losses in my automated scripts, so maybe we'll play around with this later. But I'm guessing this works like this. Let's say we enter long here. Price moves 15 pips into our favor. Then our stop loss is moved 10 pips below price action, the current closing price. And then if price comes down a little bit, our stop loss stays here. And then if price moves 12 pips into our favor from this trigger spot, then our stop loss is moved up 10 pips below price action. And again, our stop loss will not be moved until price moves another 12 pips into our favor. I believe that's how this works. We'll play around with this later on the charts. Now, if you're unclear about anything that I just covered, or you want to learn more about how this all works, just come to this alert syntax guide and just read through some of these scenarios and settings and examples. Alex and his team have done a great job of providing thorough documentation on how all of these alerts work and various examples of how you can use them. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time going over various scenarios and use cases for all of these commands, as there are quite a few examples here, but we will jump over to MetaTrader and TradingView for the remainder of this video, and we'll just try out a few test commands and see how this all works in practice. So let's jump over to TradingView and start building some alerts. But just really quickly before we do that, I think it's important to mention this early on in the video in case you run into any issues. If you get any errors from the expert advisor when you try to execute these alerts, if you get little pop-ups with error codes, come down to this useful resources section of the account page and click on the errors link here. And this will give you a list of error codes for any potential issues you might run into with the expert advisor. For example, in the previous lesson where I showed you how to set up MetaTrader 5, I kept getting this error code here, 4756. And the only way to fix this was to download this alternate copy of the expert advisor file. So if you run into any error codes, jump over to this page and just read the remarks here, the description of each code, and you should be able to work out what's going on by reading the description and trying what is suggested here. If you still can't get the script to work, make sure to send the support team a message, and I'm sure they'll get back to you as soon as they can. But anyway, let's jump over to TradingView and start today's lesson. Okay, so here we are on the Australian dollar forex market. Let's add an alert to this chart and play around with some of the syntax from the Pine Connector page. So I'm just going to right click on my chart, click add alert. I'm going to set this to a condition that will always execute. In this case, I'm going to set it to greater than 0. I'm going to turn off notify on app and any alert sounds. Today we'll test opening a short position, and then we'll test sending a command to close that position. So before we start, let's jump back over to MetaTrader. You'll notice I'm on MetaTrader 5 here. In the first lesson I was using MetaTrader 4. The platforms pretty much behave identically, and so I'll probably just hop between them throughout the lesson series depending on what I'm doing. The alert syntax is identical between the two. So before we start, I want to right click on my chart here and come down to expert list, and then I want to click on the Pine Connector, EA, and then click properties. So before we start sending commands to this expert advisor, we need to make sure we have our EA settings set up correctly. I've got my target type set to TP and stop loss based on price, and my volume type or risk type set to percentage of balance. This means whatever number I send as my risk parameter, if I bring over the alerts guide, that's this parameter here. Whatever I set this to will be a percentage of my account balance since I've set this setting to that. So just keep that in mind. If you're running into issues with your alerts, make sure you've set up your settings on the expert advisor side correctly. So everything is how I want it. Click OK, close this, and let's jump back over to TradingView and send an alert to open a sell position. So before we start, let's make sure we've ticked the webhook URL and put in the Pine Connector webhook URL. And then the very first thing we need to do for our alert syntax is paste in our license ID. So there's my ID there for my account. By the time you watch this video, this account will have expired. So don't even bother trying to use my license ID for your alerts. I just left this in for the first few videos to make it easier for you guys to follow along rather than blacking it out or blurring it or whatever. So once we've inputted our license ID, the next thing we should do is specify which direction we want our order to be in. In this case, we want to sell Aussie dollar short. The next syntax parameter is the symbol we want to trade. In this case, that's AUD/USD. Now, if you've watched the very first video in this series, you'll remember that I had to add a -2 onto my symbol because of the way Oanda lists their symbols on MetaTrader. Because I'm using MetaTrader 5 here through Pepperstone, which is a different broker, they list their symbols differently to Oanda, and in this case, I do not need to add the -2 suffix onto the symbol name. So keep that in mind. Make sure you check your symbol on MetaTrader to make sure you've got the correct symbol ticker, including any prefix or suffix. Otherwise, the alert will not fire. Get rid of that. So far, so good. Now we need to specify our stop loss. Because my risk is a percentage of my account balance, we need to specify a stop loss price before we specify our risk. Remember, I've set stop loss and take profit to a price-based parameter. So because we're selling short, let's add a stop loss at 765, just for demonstration purposes. And then next up is my risk. I'm going to set that to 1% of my account balance. Remember, if we want to set a take profit as well, we can just add TP on the end here. So TP equals, let's set it to the low of this pullback, which is around 748, 0.748. And so now we're going to open a short position on Aussie dollar with a stop loss at 76.5 cents, a risk of 1% of my account balance, and a take profit of 748, which is the low of this pullback. Let me click create and we'll see what happens. There we go. The trade has opened. I'm on the 30-minute chart here, so I need to scroll my chart down a bit to see our orders, but here's our stop loss and our take profit and our entry, which was entered at market. So we were affected by the spread here, and that's something we'll cover in a future lesson on how to mitigate that issue. But here we have an open position. We have around 11,000 units sold short here. We're on a $10,000 demo account, US dollar, and we have quite a wide stop loss from our entry. So our position size is quite small since we only risk 1% of our account. So far, so good. Everything's working. Let's try closing this trade with a different command or different alert. Let's jump over to TradingView. I'm going to open up my alerts dialog here and just edit this existing alert. Let me delete some of these old alerts. Open up this, scroll down, and I'm going to modify this alert to send a exit command to Pine Connector. So to do that, let's bring over our syntax guide again. If we scroll down on this page, you can see our market order commands. And in order to close a short position, we need to send close short with the symbol name. So we need our license ID, just the close short parameter, and then the symbol that we want to close. So that's easy. I'm just going to copy this last section, come over here, paste that in there, change the symbol to Aussie dollar. Let's save the alert, jump over to Pepperstone and see if this trade closes. There we go, easy. So the reason I'm showing you all of this is because in the next lesson, we're going to implement these commands into an actual script, a Pine script in the Pine editor. But before we do that, we need to understand how these commands work. So let's go through a couple more. All right, so we've covered a practical use case of opening a short trade and closing a short trade. It's pretty much the same steps for a long trade. So I won't go over that in today's video. I'll just quickly show you how to set up a buy stop and then cancel that buy stop, and then we'll wrap up today's video. I would show you how to use the break even and trailing stop commands. However, given the fact that we have to wait on price action to move to trigger these commands, it's going to take all day for me to record that. These commands should be pretty self-explanatory anyway, so we'll skip these commands today just to save time, and maybe I'll cover them in a future video. But for today, let's wrap this video up by creating a buy stop and then canceling that buy stop. So for this, I'm going to use MetaTrader 4 just because I took a break between recording the previous section of this video with MetaTrader 5. And it just so happens I have MetaTrader 4 set up today. But this should be a good example of how similar these platforms behave when it comes to PineConnector. So let's jump over to TradingView and create an alert. So I am on Euro Dollar here. So I'm going to click Create Alert, scroll down, turn off notifications, turn on my webhook, and clear this message text. Now let's jump back over to the syntax guide. I'm going to copy this example here and paste it into my alert. I need to replace my ID with my license ID and the market with the correct ticker. In this case, it's Euro US dollar -F. Now in the previous example, I just showed you we didn't need to use the -F suffix because I was dealing with Pepperstone, but Oanda, as you can see here, have a -F after their Forex instruments. So I need to include that suffix in this alert command. Next up, we have the price. I'm going to set my buy stop to just above the swing high here, just as an example. Let's just set it to 120 even, just to keep it simple. And I'll set my stop loss. It's currently based on price. Let's just set it to below this swing low here, which would be around 117.5, let's call it. So 1.175, comma, and then we need to specify our risk or position size. I'm going to just set mine to 1% of my account balance. Now I need to copy in my license ID, which is going to be my live license ID. So I'll need to blur this so that you guys don't steal my account. Of course, my audience wouldn't steal my license ID, but this is going on the internet, and who knows what kind of riffraff might see this number. So I need to blur that, paste that in there. And now if I scroll up to the top, make sure that this is set to greater than 0. And now when I click create, this alert should fire and we should place a buy stop at $1.20 on Euro Dollar with a stop loss at 1.175 and a risk of 1%. So let's click create, jump over to Oanda, see what happens. There we go. Buy stop placed at $1.20 with a stop loss down here at 1.175. And the size down here you can see is 0.01. That's because I'm on a live account here. I've only got $100 in this account. I'll increase this later in the series when we start playing around with an actual strategy script. But by default, PineConnector will round your position size up to the minimum lot size that is allowed by your broker. In this case, that is 0.01 or 1 mini lot. But anyway, the command worked. We have placed a buy stop with a stop loss. And if I had more money in my account, this position size would equate to 1% risk on this particular trade. So just really quickly, let's see if we can add a take profit to this. Scroll down to my alert. Let's add a TP equals 1.21 just to keep things simple. Click save and let's see how this works. There we go. Buy stop entered at 120 with our take profit and stop loss. So far so good. Let's now try canceling this buy stop. So to do that, you can just copy this here, jump over to TradingView, get rid of all of this and paste this in here. Get rid of that extra comma. And there we have it. We've got my license ID, the cancel long command, and then the symbol I want to execute this command on. Let's click save and see if that removes our buy stop. There we go. Gone. Excellent. Everything is working perfectly. And obviously to set a limit order would be exactly the same, except instead of buy stop, you would just write buy limit or sell limit. So most of these commands are pretty intuitive and self-explanatory. Obviously, the tricky part will be implementing these into an actual TradingView script. Because today's video is already quite long, I'm going to wrap this up here. And in the next video, we'll jump into the Pine editor and I will show you how to implement these commands into your Pine code using an example strategy script. This was all just the preliminary stuff to get you familiar with PineConnector, get you set up, get your head around how these commands work, how the syntax works. Now we can really hit the ground running and start doing some cool stuff with this knowledge. So thanks for watching. Best of luck with your trading. Goodbye.